Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How CMOs are Monetizing Social Marketing and Measuring ROI, sponsored by Vocus. My name is Justin Bridigan. I'm with Marketing Sherpa, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We have some housekeeping information and some introductions before we begin today's webinar. First is myself. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Marketing Sherpa and MECLab's Primary Research. I currently oversee all the marketing department and specialize in creating, organizing, and implementing some marketing plans for the Marketing Sherpa summits, webinars, workshops, and publications. Next up, we have Sergio Bolaño. He's the Director of Research at Marketing Sherpa and MECLab's Primary Research. He is the lead author of the 2011 Email Marketing Benchmark Report and the just-released 2011 Social Marketing Benchmark Report. Now, Sergio researches, writes, and frequently speaks about these topics at our Sherpa Summits and professional training workshops. We're pleased to have Kai Strantz with us today. He's the Director of Product Marketing at Vocus. He's responsible for the overall product strategy and roadmap of Vocus's on-demand public relations software. Now, additionally, Kai heads the company's industry research, providing both analysis of the competitive landscape and identifying strategic opportunities for the company. So we have some great presenters today, and we'd like to begin by letting everybody know they can join the conversation on Twitter with us at #SherpaWebinar. We've got Todd over here monitoring the hashtag, so feel free to send us any of your questions or feedback as the presentation is going on. Also remember, you can use the GoToWebinar question box feature on the right of your screen. And keep in mind, we will have about 10 minutes of Q&A after the presentation has concluded. Now, a question I get quite often is this presentation going to be available afterwards? Yes, we're actually recording the presentation right now, and we'll send it to you in a follow-up email tomorrow. So let's go ahead and begin. For today's webinar, we're going to start by setting the stage for social marketing monetization. We're also going to learn how CMO priorities for social marketing are changing and really what's driving the investment in these social media programs. We're also going to discuss how CMOs are calculating the social marketing return on investment and the first step to monetizing the social media channel. And Kai's with us, and he's going to be jumping in at any moment and tell us about some of the things that Vocus are doing and also their 5 tips of social marketing success. So what do we do here at Marketing Sherpa? Our job at Marketing Sherpa is to research, write, and speak about what works in marketing today. Now, our main goal in mind is really to help marketers like yourself in the audience to continually improve your performance. So how do we do this? Well, we accomplish this with our annual research-based publishing and training cycle. Now, as the graph shows, the cycle begins when we publish research on what is working and what's not working for marketers. And we do this through our benchmark reports and our case studies. Then from those, we identify what the best practices are, and we formulate a practical methodology to do that. Those of you that are familiar with the new email handbook and B2B handbook, you'll notice the LEAPS methodology and also the FUEL methodology. We also have special reports that we use as well, such as the CMO special reports. Then from those, we start to teach marketers on how to apply those best practices and methodologies. These can be through our email summits that we have or the optimization summit that's coming up, and also through certification training and webinars such as this. This cycle is focused on strategies and practices for social media monetization. So going through with this, we want to discuss what some of the importance of social marketing maturity is, and discussing these in the 3 phases of social marketing maturity. So one of the most important insights we gained from our recent study is how far marketers have advanced through the 3 phases. The first phase is the trial phase. This is where an organization does not have a process or guideline for performing social marketing. You're just getting started. Next would be the transition phase, where an organization has an informal process with a few guidelines. You're sporadically performing those. And then finally, the strategic phase, where an organization has a formal process with thorough guidelines they routinely perform. So what we'd like to do now is kind of get a feel from the audience on which of these phases best describes your organization. So we're going to launch a poll now, and feel free to give us your response. So take just a minute here and fill out the poll question if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you. All right, it looks like we have about 72% of you are voting. And it looks like, let's start with the trial phase. We have about 27% of you say that you don't have a process or any guidelines that you're currently following. We have about 55% of you that are in the transition phase, where you have an informal process with a few guidelines. About 17 are in the strategic phase. So let me go ahead and close the poll and show everyone these results. All right, so you should be seeing that currently right now on your screen. All right, so let's see how this compares to some of the study that we've already done. So it appears that we've got about 46% of our CMOs that are in the transition phase compared to the research we did of about 760 of those. Now, we had 57% in the audience. So we have around 11% of you are more in that transition phase that I was discussing. So let's look at this. What's the news? The good news is about 1 in 5 organizations already have reached the strategic phase. But the bad news is nearly that twice are still in this trial phase that are just getting started. So really, what does this mean? Basically, it means a strategic process is needed if we're going to effectively manage the investment and the required resources to monetize this social media channel and really prove our ROI. And so Sergio now is going to take us through how we can make this possible. Sergio, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Justin. I think I have control of the screen now. Great. Good. Well, what we're going to talk about today is, first we're going to start with a little research about what CMOs are thinking and how their perception of social media monetization is driving their investments in the tactics. What you're looking at here are the priorities, some of the priorities for social media marketing that CMOs have. And out of the study that we recently completed with 3,300 marketers in it, about 760 of those were CMOs, or senior marketing executives. What we see here is that the goal of social channels today is monetization. They want to be able to measure and prove a return on their investment. If you look at the chart is broken down by each CMO's stage in social marketing maturity. So the lighter shade of red bar are those in the strategic phase, and the darkest shade are those in the trial phase. And so what you see is that in the strategic phase organizations are 80% more likely than those in the trial phase to have social marketing ROI as a prioritization for 2011. And what we wanted to know is, well, why are trial phase organizations, or why trial phase organizations don't have a process for performing social marketing or measuring ROI. Let me get back in control of this. Okay, so those who are not measuring or not prioritizing social marketing ROI tend to be those in the trial phase, and the reason for that is their perception of social marketing, their social marketing investment. What you see here that's outlined in yellow is that social marketing is producing measurable ROI, so let's continue to invest in this tactic. That's the attitude of 47% of CMOs in the strategic phase of social marketing maturity, yet that is 4 times as likely as those in the trial phase to be producing measurable ROI and investing more in the tactic. There is no process. If you're in the trial phase, you have no process, you have no guidelines, so you have no proof of ROI, so why make an additional investment? And that's one of the problems that we have with monetizing the channel for social media. There's also, if you look at the bottom of this, I always like this response. We've done this in other surveys as well, and one of the things we asked was, here's what their perception is, and the response to one group is, social marketing is basically free, let's keep it that way. If you think social marketing is free, you're destined to get what you pay for in the long run, because it requires an investment. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to prove social marketing ROI to those that control the budgets so that you can get what you pay for, so that you can turn social marketing into a financial channel. And one of the things that we looked at a couple of years was the reality of social marketing and ROI. And just a couple of years ago, there really wasn't one. People didn't have a cohesive way of measuring ROI. They were unable to prove it. But what we find today is that the average ROI from social marketing is 95%. That's extremely important. If you look at the vertical dotted line on this chart, that's the number or the percentage of CMOs that are reporting 100% ROI. 25%, or 1 in 4 CMOs today, are doubling their social marketing investment. So if they're putting $50,000 in, they're getting $100,000 back on their social marketing investment. Our research, this kind of research, has helped marketers overcome the myth that social marketing ROI isn't measurable. So you've got to wonder how to calculate this, because we've gone through some variations on how to calculate social marketing ROI. The first thing you have to do is that ROI is a measure of financial value returned on every dollar invested. It's a financial measurement. It's something that in the C-suite it has an impact if it's ROI because it has a financial return on investment. The standard formula, or the traditional formula for measuring ROI, has been value gained from investment minus the cost of the investment divided by the cost of the investment. But tracking the right metrics for determining the values and costs of social media marketing can be a challenge. The third bullet on this screen is a quote from one of the CMOs. Around 10% of your social media our social media activity directly translates to bottom line results, making ROI easy to determine for that portion. However, 90% of the work has to do with people building their reputation online and helping others so they can effectively promote the brand online. That big chunk, that 90% of the work, is impossible to measure in terms of ROI. And that's true, but what we're going to show you is how to measure the ROI from that 10% while including the cost of that 90% that you can't track back to ROI. So the first thing you need to be able to do is measure the results you get in order to calculate social media ROI. And in terms of social media ROI, some metrics matter more than others. There are plenty of metrics that can be measured. There are a lot of qualitative, non-financial metrics that can be measured, but do they really matter when you're trying to calculate ROI? There are quantitative financial metrics that should be measured, but not all of them can be measured. But the key is where those two overlap, metrics that can be measured and metrics that should be measured, are the metrics that matter most for ROI. And those are financial values for calculating and proving ROI. Now, something to remember here is over the course of this emergence of social media marketing, when marketers decided that they couldn't find a way to get their hands around ROI, they started coming up with some other measurements, things like return on engagement or return on innovation, things that were not quantitative ROI but more qualitative ROI. But that means nothing to the executives in the C-suite that are making the financial decisions for the company. It has to be based on what they perceive as ROI, what they've come to know as ROI. So these are some of the values that CMOs can use to calculate the return. A lot of these values are estimated, are quantitative values based on social media metrics like the number of likes or fans on your Facebook page, the number of followers on Twitter, and so forth. There are also estimated values of qualitative social media metrics, things like sentiment, awareness, voice, things that you can't really find a way to connect directly to ROI. These metrics are useful to monitor your audience, but not to measure ROI. Matter of fact, Kai is going to get into that in his session on for Vocus about the monitoring and the importance of monitoring your audience and monitoring some of these social media specific metrics. All right, opposed
Sergio,
to the, yes.
I'm sorry, Sergio. Quick question. This is Kai. When you're talking about the estimated value, is that value a set principle that people are kind of coming along, or does that vary organization to organization?
It varies a great deal, and one of the numbers that we're going to show you coming up, as a matter of fact, it's on this next slide, is how some things, a lot of things like the estimated qualitative value of things like sentiment, and how you really can't connect, or it'd be extremely difficult to connect that to an actual financial outcome. But there are estimated values, like the second item in this chart that you're looking at now, the estimated value of new leads generated by social marketing programs. A lot of organizations, particularly B2B organizations, they know what a qualified lead is worth to their company. And they're able to connect that when a lead originates, can be tracked back from a conversion point, like a registration page, back to their original engagement on a social media site. They can track that value to a financial return. So that's one of the values that should be used to calculate. Another value, and the most obvious one, is the actual value of sales generated by marketing programs. Sales can be tracked back. If you're an e-commerce, if you have an e-commerce site, or you're an online retailer, and you have the ability to immediately convert a customer into a sale through an e-commerce purchase, then you're able to also track back from the landing page they came in on to the social media site where they were engaged, and then clicked on a link where they participate in that community, and eventually came to your website. So that's the most obvious one. But there is also something here that you have to look at that a lot of organizations overlook. If you look at the set of bars at the bottom, they're representing the reduced cost of customer support and customer acquisition due to social marketing programs. There are two ways to gain value or to make money in this world. One is to increase your income, and the other is to reduce your costs. In the case of social media is very effective at reducing the cost of things, particularly like customer support and customer acquisition. But a lot of organizations, in this case only 12 or 13% of organizations, are using that value, that cost reduction, as a value when they're calculating their return side of the equations. So which values can you and should you use for social marketing maturity? Well, the other side of the equation is the cost side. The cost side. We just talked about the return side, the value you gain from your social marketing investment. On the other side is the cost side. Costs are always easier to calculate than the return is, because with return you're trying to find where to attribute the value from, the income from. But on the cost side, it's usually much more obvious. And what we're looking at here is a chart that shows the average share of a social marketing budget that each one of these costs fall into. Things like staff salaries and staff-related expense, paid advertising on social media sites, and other expenses there. Those are all on the cost side, and those are hard numbers. If you have that investment, and that investment includes your investment into that 90% of the social marketing program that you really can't account for in terms of ROI, but the cost is still there, and those things should be included in your ROI calculation. And something you've got to remember, if you look at those first two bars on the left, the staff salaries and the paid advertising, that's a good breakout of how social media falls into two main media categories, earned media and paid media. Earned media, if you're using social media to do things like to engage, to increase your search engine rankings, to do things like that, you are required to have a lot of human resource time invested into that. And so earned media is time intensive, and it requires a lot of resources, and that's why in most budgets today, the staff salaries and staff-related expense has the largest share of the social marketing budget. The other side of it is the paid media, which is cash intensive. It's a tactic requiring fewer human resources and more cash. So depending on how your organization uses social media, if you're heavy in the the advertising side, you're going to see that paid advertising bar stand much higher. If you're using it more for engagement, for search engine optimization and things like that, then you're going to end up having a much higher share of your money going to staff salaries and other staff-related expenses. The point of this is that we've looked at the values that represent the return. Now we've looked at the costs that represent the investment in social media marketing. Now you have to take those things and you have to apply the formula that we used a little bit earlier for calculating ROI, the ROI of social marketing programs. And just again, that formula is value gained from investment minus the cost of the investment divided by the investment, and that equals your % of ROI. That is a formula that the senior marketers in your organization, the executives in the C-suite who are going to make budget decisions, that is the formula that they trust to try to get a return on engagement or a return on innovation or other ROI measurement that is designed specifically for social media. Just isn't going to work. It's not going to be convincing. So let's take an example here. In this case, let's say it's a B2B example. Let's say it's a social marketing campaign with the goal of generating leads. And the value was derived from the campaign generating 500 qualified leads tracked back to social media sites. This organization knows that the value to their company of each qualified lead is about $150. That's what that lead is going to convert into on average in the end. And so 500 qualified leads at $150 a piece is $75,000 in value gained. The cost in this particular program was staff plus other expenses of $15,000. So if you look at the bottom line, the bottom bullet here, the formula would be $75,000 minus the $15,000 in costs, divided by the $15,000 in costs. And for this campaign, they would gain a return on investment of 400%. The problem is that you can have the calculations in place, but you've got to really have a way of thinking about social marketing and monetizing social marketing that is going to change what you're doing now. What that usually requires is a shift from tactical thinking about social marketing to strategic thinking about social marketing. And what we've done over the past year or so is, what our research showed us is that that in order to get from one phase of social marketing maturity to the next, in order to advance and get to that point where you're a strategic thinker about social media marketing, you really need a methodology. You need a method for mapping a social marketing strategy. And what Marketing Sherpa came up with is the Social Marketing Roadmap. And ROAD is an acronym for Research, Objectives, Actions, and Devices. And we've got a full day workshop about the roadmap to train people how to get from the trial phase to the transition phase to the strategic phase using this methodology. But what I'd like to do now is just show you some of the hubs of this methodology. Spend about 5 or 10 minutes going through how this methodology works to get you started in it and to get you started in advancing toward that strategic phase of social marketing maturity where you can monetize the channel, monetize social media, and develop your ROI. The first letter in the acronym is R, and that stands for research, gathering intelligence on target audiences and their social media behavior. Research is the first step in the roadmap methodology. The monitoring helps us identify and profile target audiences. We're not talking about coming up with measures for calculating ROI at this point. What we're talking about is the ability, monitoring to give us the ability to identify the characteristics and behaviors specific to social media of our target audiences. And the way that we want to do this is to monitor is, it's similar to to what you do in your search engine optimization, your approach to search engine optimization. Monitoring is all about the search phrases you use, the search phrases that you're looking for out there in the social media sphere. And so if you're going to start your monitoring program and you've got the tools to get started with, the first thing you want to do is look at what's most important. Just like in search marketing, what you would look at are things like coming up with search phrases for your industry sector, for your technologies, for the companies involved, the brands, the products, services, some of the key issues, even key experts and, industry experts and key employees. These are becoming very important. People are building their own brands within industries now, their own personal brands. And to find these people, they tend to be very high-level, high influential people in social media marketing. So you've got the search phrases. Some of the things, the social media factors that you're looking for are things like social voice or strength, sentiment, which is a very important measure in social media marketing today. Never before have we been able to just go out and easily measure what the sentiment is about your brand or about your products and so forth. Passion, unique authors. Finding those unique authors is critically important today, and Kai's going to get into that a little bit later. Other things like social reach and content sharing and things that relate to social media are very important to listen for. The reason that we want to talk about next is the tools and solutions for monitoring social media, for finding these things. And what we found is that, there are different types of social media. They're easiest to break down between free social media analytics and monitoring solutions and paid or custom developed monitoring solutions. What we found is that about two-thirds of organizations are using free social media analytics and monitoring solutions versus about a third that are actually investing in these solutions. And the reason there is that difference is particularly when you're in the trial phase and then getting into the transition phase, you're not quite sure what you're looking for yet. So having a solution with limited capabilities doesn't hurt what you're doing. But as you start getting further into the transition phase, as you start developing into the strategic phase, you're going to need solutions that offer a lot more. You're going to need solutions that have full features and capabilities allowing you to look for exactly what you're trying to find out there. The screenshot on the right happens to be a screenshot from Vocus, our sponsor today. It's a monitoring solution. And Kai, you want to tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here with this screen?
Well, yeah, and I'm specifically with the screen, and I think that, when you talk about paid solutions versus the free solutions, I think that previous slide that you had, where it itemized all of those pieces there, that one there, the items going down the social media factors, there's a lot of free tools that do a lot of those individual bullet points or some of those bullet points combined. I think when you start looking at the paid solutions and solutions like Vocus, which is, you're not only monitoring the content, you're then looking, how do I engage with these people? How do I measure whether they like what I'm sharing or what I'm doing? And looking at that more comprehensive suite is when you go into the paid. And I think one thing to note is that the industry of free tools has been fantastic at this point. Social media has been it's been the bright, shiny object out there, and the free tools have taught a lot of us, including ourselves, how the space is reacting and what people are doing. But a lot of those providers, like Twitter, the content that Twitter provides today free, that a lot of these tools and platforms are built on, unfortunately, fortunately for them, unfortunately for the rest of us, is we're going to be looking to monetize that content, and that's looking to happen fairly shortly. And as you can imagine, that content won't be cheap. So, what solutions like Vocus and many others out there, the technology providers in the space is how can we combine all of these tools into one place and then also be able to leverage our relationships and bring that content in and store it and then be able to measure it so you can do true measurement of quarter over quarter, year over year type stuff.
Great. All right, let's move to the next slide. Shifting a little slowly for me. There we go. So the purpose of monitoring social media is to be able to segment by social behavior and influence. And you've got to remember that you've already got a CRM system or an email database, and those are already segmented. And so anything you do with social media to create new segments are going to become sub-segments to what you already have. So it's important to keep it simple so that you can make this a workable sub-segment into your prospect and customer data. We came up with a simple model. It breaks it out into 3 basic segments: the silent majority, the vocal minority, and the social authority. The silent majority, those are people who join but really participate in a social site. They're consumers of data. They read, watch, and listen to user-generated content, but they don't produce any. They generally don't have as many friends, contacts, or followers on social media, so they have a fairly low level of social influence. A good example of that is the way that I use Facebook. I've got friends on there. I tend to go in maybe 2 or 3 times a week just to see what's going on. I read the home feed and just kind of see what my friends are doing, but I don't interact very much, so I don't have very much social influence. The second segment is the vocal minority. This is a kind of, if you look at it as a mass market, an important mass market, because they're interactive. The vocal minority is a segment you're really going to want to go after. Those are the ones that join and actively participate in social media. They share user-generated content and their own commentary. They tend to have more friends, more contacts, more followers, so they have a moderately high level of social influence. The next stage, and this is, you have to look at this stage. We're going to describe how to approach it in a minute, but you have to look at this segment, completely different from your vocal minority. These are the social authority. In the screen we were looking at before, that was a screen looking for the topic of social media, and one of the gurus in there, along with people like Brian Solis and Chris Brogan, was Lee Odin, and he was in the highlighted in the slide of the Vocus monitoring solution. These are the people that have not hundreds of followers, but hundreds of thousands of followers. These are the people who have blogs that when people that they have thousands and thousands of people who subscribe to their blogs. They have a great deal of influence. They build and moderate their communities. They create and aggregate user-generated content. They have a very high level of social influence, and they're going to be one of your key targets in your social marketing program. So now that you've kind of broken down the segments and you know how to monitor, what you've got to do is organize this information. And this is just an example of a worksheet. Let's take one product category and subject matter. Let's say you're an online publisher of email marketing information, similar to what Marketing Sherpa does. You have one of your key target audiences are email marketers and agencies. And what you want to do is target the email marketers and agencies that are in the vocal minority. You also want to know in the third column where you're going to find them. And what we found in this research is those email marketers and agencies and the vocal minorities, they tended to be very active with a microblog on using Twitter, using it with their personal brand rather than representing a company. We also found them on social networks like a LinkedIn social network within a LinkedIn group where they had a branded group. It was branded for the topic on LinkedIn. And then we wanted to know how are they using these social sites and what interests them on it. So if we look at the microblogs being run by email marketers and agencies in the vocal minority, we find is that they're following email marketing influencers. They're following other influencers. They're sharing links with followers. They're interested in email research, best practices, and increasing followers. If we're looking at the social networks, the LinkedIn group, they join these groups. They start and comment on discussions. They want to gain recognition in the email community. They're interested in things like email research, best practices, career opportunities, and most importantly, expand their own network in order to present themselves as a thought leader. The next phase in the next step in the roadmap methodology is objectives. And defining the objectives aligned with target audiences is very important. It's, you know, we set objectives every year for our marketing programs or every quarter or however often we do it, but we've got to be really granular with social media because remember, this is still in the proving stage. To get money to support your programs, you still need to prove its value to the executives. So in this case, let's say we took the target audience segment we were just talking about, email marketers and the vocal minority, and we've set some specific objectives for it, things like increasing likes on your Facebook brand page by a certain percentage, increasing website traffic from Facebook, reducing costs to support customer segments. All of these objectives relate to those metrics that you'll be able to use to calculate social marketing ROI. The next step in the social marketing roadmap is actions or having a tactical plan of actions for executing your email marketing, your social marketing strategy. One of the key things we found is represented in this chart, that creating an effective social marketing tactical plan of action may sound obvious, but it's not something everyone is doing. Most organizations are opting to go with what's fast and easy in social media marketing rather than what's effective. What this chart is showing us is, if you look at the vertical axis, the higher one of these dots or spheres is on this chart, the more effective it is. The further to the right that one of these spheres is on this chart, the more difficult it is to implement. And the size of the sphere indicates the percentage of organizations using it. So what we see here, if you look in the upper right corner, blogger relations is the most effective but the most difficult to implement social marketing tactic. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use something like blogger relations to target your social authorities. It's a very important tool for targeting your social authority. If you go to the other end of the spectrum, you see two of the spheres, social sharing buttons on websites and social sharing buttons on email. Those are tactics that are used, both of those tactics are used more often than blogger relations. But they're at the bottom of the spectrum in terms of level of effectiveness. The reason that they're used more often than blogger relations is because they're all the way to the left. They have the lowest degree of difficulty to implement. So what this shows us basically is that we're all a little bit lazy about what we do in social media marketing. We're more likely to opt for an easy tactic than we are to opt for what's a little more difficult but much more effective. So when we talked about identifying the different segments like vocal minority and social authority, and then we talked about the tactics, let's just talk very briefly about tactics for doing these things, tactics for engaging the vocal minority and for pitching the social authority. Remember, the vocal minority, they're high level of influence in social media and they're extremely active, but they're a mass audience. These are a lot of people in your target audience. So you have to use a one-to-many tactic to reach them rather than a one-to-one tactic. But you want to be able to use that target audience profile we showed a little bit earlier to determine where they are and what interests them, and then join in the conversations on these sites and engage them in a way that interests them by giving them links to content that would be of value to these organizations. If you don't profile them, if you haven't targeted them or created a target audience profile, you won't know what to talk about in your conversations. You won't know how to engage them with content. The other segment, the most important segment that you can look for is the social authority. And pitching the social authority is very similar, so one-to-one tactic that's very similar to traditional press relations, where if you have a list of editors or reporters that are covering your industry, you're going to to deal with them on a one-to-one basis. You're going to find out what their likes and dislikes are, and you're going to provide the information that they need. One of the things I liked about Vocus when I was looking at their program is Vocus, while they provide the technical solutions for social media marketing, they're doing it from a PR standpoint. A lot of their experience and their focus is on the press side of things. So they have a very good understanding of pitching the social authority. But one of the things you really have to understand is that applying practices similar to press relations is important, that one-to-one contact is important, but it has to conform to new social media cultures and practices. And an example of this is if you were Cisco and you wanted to pitch your new flip video technology to an editor or to a social authority or to an editor in a traditional publication, what you would do is you would send that along, and you would send it along with a prepaid return address envelope so that they could return it to you once they've reviewed the product. In social marketing, it's a little different. Social authorities are going to accept things. They're going to take that video camera, they're going to use it, they're going to report on it, but they're also going to put a disclaimer if they write a blog post or they release some other information. They're going to put a disclaimer that it was provided, but they're going to accept it. So there are differences in cultures between traditional press and the new press or social authority. The fourth step in the roadmap is devices. The D stands for devices. And at this point, what we're doing is we're shifting from thinking about our research, our objectives, and our plan of action to finally deciding what we're going to use, what platforms we're going to use to execute these tactics on, what's going to be the best fit, and how to build that into an architecture that works well. One of the things you can do is something like this, which is a very simple SWOT analysis, just a strengths and weakness. You know you need a social network, but which one? Are you going to use a popular brand like Facebook or LinkedIn, or are you going to use a niche product, or are you going to develop a custom social network built right into your site? A SWOT analysis will help you decide on what brands you're going to use. The other thing you've got to think about is the architecture for using these platforms. When social marketers first started getting involved in this, basically it was just a matter of going out and opening up a bunch of social sites. And you ended up with an architecture that looked something like this. There was no plan or purpose behind any of the sites that you had. There was really no connection between the sites. So they were basically random acts of social marketing. Today, though, after dissecting a lot of successful social marketing architectures, we found that a hub-and-spoke architecture is what really works well for a lot of organizations. Basically, you have your hub sites in the middle for content and conversion, and you have your spoke sites around those hubs for building communities and relations. But what's most important here is that because of the hub-and-spoke architecture, you're able to direct the flow of traffic from those social sites into the hub sites and then back out to the social sites. What's not important here in this architecture, it's not the number of sites that you have in your architecture that's important. It's that you have a plan and a purpose for every site. And just to give you a quick idea of a plan and a purpose for the hub sites usually include websites and blogs. Your website is generally your primary point of conversion, while your blog is more dynamic. It has multimedia content and a lot of keyword-rich content, so it's search engine friendly. So basically, you're using the hub sites for search engine optimization and conversion, while the spoke sites are the social networks for building relationships and driving traffic into the hub, the microblogs for quick engagement, forums, which are quickly becoming the product development or the research and development arms of a lot of organizations, are also driving traffic back into your conversion points. And so by using these steps, by using this methodology of research, objectives, actions, and devices, you'll be able to map a social marketing strategy that will allow you to have the tools, to have the knowledge that you need to monetize the social marketing channel and start proving and driving ROI so that you can get greater investments into this channel. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand you off now to Kai Stantz from Vocus, and he's going to talk about the 5 tips for social media success.
Yeah, thank you, Sergio, very much for having myself and Vocus shown today. Really, this has been, social media is really in its 3rd year of maturity out there, and it's still very early on. And what's been interesting is we've been going through it as a technology provider. Is once everyone's distraction was, diminished by the bright, shiny object out there of social media, and the dust finally started to settle, what we saw is there was a number of things that came out that there were kind of 5 key things. And we talked in the beginning about the trial phase and people that are in the transition phase. But I think this can also apply to people in the strategic phase, is these concepts being important. But we find that the number one reason in survey and research that we've done, and as well as some others, the number one reason why people do not enter the space of social media is a very clear and simple concept, which is they don't know what to say in those first initial steps, or is the strategy that they have in place, their communications plan that they might have in place, be something that can work across all the boards. And it's one of those things, as we were developing the technology and working with a lot of those people who were in the transition strategic phase, what started to become very clear, and Sergio, I appreciate you calling out that, our original area of expertise was in the public relations space, and certainly social media has turned PR and marketing upside down, and we've seen a large convergence between the two, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to social media. And when you start to look at those mediums in terms of what journalists are saying in the news about your company, and CMOs are becoming much more aware, CEOs are becoming much more aware of the value of traditional media. So how these 3 start to interact, it becomes incredibly important. And an example here, we've removed the name of the innocent in this case. So the data we're going to be looking at in these next few slides is an airline. Won't be hard to distinguish who they are, but without calling them out. But you can see in a strike environment that they had, and we can see this across all industries. And in fact, you can see this not only across industries, but also even within specific issues within an organization, is the language that's being used. If you can start to understand the words that people use and how they use them, and then know that when you're dealing with journalists, or you're dealing with bloggers, or you're dealing with your consumers, likely in social media, that what you use becomes important. That in this case, if I'm dealing with journalists, the idea of talking about the unions themselves is important, but to the bloggers, there's really something else that's going on out there. While the word strike is very small in its appearance here, there's something else that is obviously important to them at that time, so it may not be necessary. Can't say that it isn't necessary to address it. And then for social media, it's something completely else. And being consumers, they may be worried about their flights or being able to make certain areas. So when people start to see this, there's a bit of a diminish of an anxiety out there that how you reach and work out in between these 3 mediums becomes important. And we'll see this carry through throughout the next few steps here. And really these tips become more the early phases of strategy that we've seen out there. Now, in terms of another area that people are very surprised when they do enter social media, oops, I jumped back one here, is there's a number of notions that people have when they first enter social media that are surprising to them. One is as they start to monitor. So that first step being, as we talked about with the research, it needs to be that listening phase. So they go and they sign up their accounts and they start looking at content as it's flowing in. And there's a couple of things that are very surprising to them, which is who's talking about you. It's not that, in fact, most people's perceptions are there's no one talking about us. And then they step into it and then they realize, wow, we have employees talking about us, we have customers talking about us, and I thought the employees loved us, but there's actually some negative commentary out there about us. We thought the customers loved us, but we can actually see customer complaints. So many times people, when they first enter the social media space, they're very shocked and surprised at what's out there and what's being said about them. Sometimes it's good, but most of the times the initial reaction can be negative with that. But with that, you also then see a tremendous opportunity. And what companies start to realize is it's when employees, you can start to leverage employees that are talking about. And an example, one of the leading advocates for the airline here is by the use of employees being able to communicate your message out there. And the fact is that employees can be influential in terms of the message. People trust people. They don't necessarily trust an organization that's on Twitter. In fact, there was a great study that was done by Pew Research about the State Department. The Twitter handle of the State Department had much less followers and value than those employees that were actually tweeting from State Department. And then understanding who those influencers are then becomes also important as well. And this is where we start to see, and being in that PR space originally, is where people are then surprised that media outlets are actually influential in the space that you might be in. They're actually communicators, not through your press releases or through initial relationships, but that you find media outlets are also talking about you, in this case here, BBC World, being number 2 on the list. And the idea of influencers should, as you start to look at them, and why we do like to respect and follow people like Brian Solis and Leon and others who have these massive followings. What you want to be careful of, and the trap that people often fall into, is the popularity contest. People that have followers of 100, 200, or even 500 people can be incredibly influential, because if they can get that small base of 1 to 500 people to act or react on something, is much better than anybody who has a base following of 100,000 people that uses them as a resource but won't necessarily react on that. Certainly people with large influence like Brian Solis and Leo may not fall into that category, but you want to be careful not to follow into it. It's those that can get others to take action and be able to measure that and understand who they are. So once you have a really good understanding of what people are saying, who's saying it, in terms of the language they're using and who's using that language, as Sergio said, that the sentiment also becomes really important in this aspect. And I think that aspect is, and this comes back to looking at news versus blogs versus social media. And you'll see that this sentiment, that the way in which you react to an issue or concern or anything that happens in the social media sphere, we know that social media on average tweets last for about a day and a half. And what you do in that day and a half period and react can then determine how bloggers react. And I ran out of space here to show the news, is that each of these charts and the way in which people react can be, and oftentimes, vary wildly. But there is a trend, and the overall trend is bloggers tend to be a little more educated in terms of forming the response. They take a few days. You might see an immediate reaction, but then you might see who the people are that come out a few days down the road. And then the news is always a mix. They want to see how you react to the social media side, and then news also comes back around when they see the content coming from influential bloggers as well. But you'll see this varied reaction between all three, and it's important to understand how those three actually react to each other. Because in that reaction, what you see And what oftentimes people forget about is traditional media. The social media space, again, being that bright, shiny object, we've heard from Fortune 100 companies, we've heard strategies where people have gone in and said, we're no longer focusing on traditional media. Social media is where it's at. And the truth is the real influencers out there is still traditional media in today's age. In fact, the topics that are trending on Twitter today, most oftentimes 50% of the trending topics are originating from traditional media. It was a news story that was posted. In fact, more than 75% of us are contributing to this influx of social media by the information that we share. 75% of it is news content. We are redistributing news stories that we read, that we've liked, we posted to Facebook, we posted to Twitter. And journalists are also seeing this behavior as well, and they're also capitalizing on it. And the one example here in terms of where you cannot forget about it, and going back to, Sergio, what you were talking about with, it is definitely changed in terms of I share the flip cam to a journalist and they need to note. The thing is, I don't need to share anything anymore. Journalists are going to let us know what they think about a product or a service, whether it was an airline flight, and I can see who those are. And the examples that are being shown here, and this is journalists that have tweeted positively but have never written a story about this airline. And think about that. Journalists who are conveying something on Twitter and have not written a story positive, that's good. And that's definitely opening the door for this relationship building. And I firmly believe that social media and billions of tweets per month has reintroduced this concept of relationship building with individuals. Now, what's even more dangerous to me in this aspect is that journalists are tweeting negatively out there. And if they've tweeted negatively and have never written about my company, that is the possibility for a very dangerous scenario. And we're seeing this, and we're seeing this more often. We're seeing journalists bypass PR departments and marketing organizations, at airlines and other consumers, and directly posting questions out there and saying, anybody out there have a horror story about X brand? And this is stuff that you need to be acutely aware of, because once it gets a hold of by other media outlets or influencers out there, it does spread and has the potential to spread very quickly. So I know that we're getting here at the top of the hour. A couple things to keep in mind. Once you have all of these steps here, we can then start talking about measurement and success out there. ROI is fantastic in terms of truly measuring dollars. And what we as technology companies are doing out there, and we're starting to see this, largely on the enterprise side. Salesforce made the acquisition of Radian6 and integration to tools like Omniture and WebTrends, and as well as other companies. We're trying to figure out that way to help measure ROI, the whole downstream, from when you post something on Twitter, what did the person land on the page at the end, and how much did they buy, or what did they what service did they sign up for? And that's what we're all trying to figure out. But the initial steps that I think we're trying to give people at least to understand is, and especially in this trial and transition for the technology companies, is, are people liking what I'm sharing? And if that's something that first and foremost, that people like what you share, they then retweet it, they're clicking on the links that you're providing, they see you as a resource, it then makes these whole additional steps of doing true ROI. And there's a few companies that do it very well. We've seen Dell talk about they did their $1 million worth of laptops on Facebook. You have Southwest Airlines, which can track a tweet back to, this specific tweet we know generated $100K in revenue when we announced a new route. So they are able to be done. We want to make it simpler for people, because right now that coordination is pretty intensive, and Sergio talked about that, creating landing pages and all these other things. So the race is to help everybody out there create one unified enterprise type tool to be able to do that for you. So I know we're at the top of the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and hand over our last slide here.
All right, thanks, Kai, and also Sergio for those great insights. We wanted to remind all of our webinar attendees that by using the link below that you see on the screen, you can actually save $100 on the 2011 Social Marketing Benchmark Report, courtesy of Vocus. And we appreciate the presenters today and their insights on social media marketing. And we're now going to have time for about one question. Unfortunately, we got quite a few, so we're going to monitor those. But it's just a follow-up question that is from let's see, Aaron Jones asked the question, what do you see international audiences increasing or decreasing the use of social media? And that can be an open-ended question to either of you.
Well, Aaron, if you're talking about use in terms of the consumer's use of it, without question that's going up in all countries. We get worldwide response to our surveys, but our surveys interview marketers, not the consumer. But if you look at things like ComScore and other research organizations that measure the audiences, social media is now being used as often as mainstream media like televisions today. So that's going up. Marketers are just 2 years ago, a report that we did compared to 2 years later now, there is probably a somewhere between a 20-fold difference in the number of marketers really using social media, not just setting up an account, but using it in their marketing programs today than there was just a year or two ago. So without question, both here in the U.S. and internationally, social media use on both the marketer side and the consumer side is up just tremendously.
Okay, I sure appreciate that. All right, everyone, we appreciate you joining us today. Just a reminder, we will be sending the slide presentation along with the audio and video of this over to you tomorrow in an email. So thank you again for all your questions, and feel free to contact us if you have any further questions. We'll be able to help you out. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.